Now that we've set up our workspace, we're going to begin to get a feel for mixing paint and placing paint in our palette and then applying that to the paper surface. So what I want to do now is move my palette to the middle here so I can get up a little closer, and then we'll go back to the other format that we had. So what I'm going to do is we're going to work with ultramarine blue. You could also use cobalt blue, or just one color, because we want to get the feel for mixing the paint. We're not concerned right now about having a lot of colors. Later on we'll get into colors. So I'm going to take this paint and I'm going to put it in one of the wells. And I'm going to put maybe about that much. Maybe it could be a little bit less, but about that much. What you don't want to do is just put a little dot, because that's not enough paint, because we're going to use this blue to make a lot of strokes and so forth. So I'm going to start with this. Now, I'm also going to use either a number 8 or a number 10 or 11 brush. As I mentioned in the other segment, different manufacturers have really different sizes for the numbers they assign. So roughly a brush maybe about so big. Okay, it could be a little smaller. You don't want a really small brush, and you don't want a very large round brush. Okay, now this paint is pretty thick and sticky. Now we're working with transparent watercolor. We're not going to paint as if it's like oil paint or acrylic where we build up opaque layers. We want to create transparent layers as we build our paintings. So right now it's very sticky and thick. So what we want to do is just to make it a little bit more loose so that it can go on more as a very dark wash. So what I'll do is take my water here, and I'll take this little eyedropper and I'll drop maybe 2 drops in there, 3, and then I'll take the back of my brush and I'm going to kind of break up this paint. Okay, so now it's more fluid at this point, but we don't want to get it too thin because we want to actually try to get a feel for creating washes that are at different thicknesses or different levels of dark and light. We call value. And it's hard to do in watercolor because on the palette it's hard to tell what value it's going to end up being painted at. It's going to dry, it's going to even be a different value from where you put the wet paint to the dry paint. So we're going to try to start getting a feel for how to control that. Now I mixed it with the back of my brush so I didn't get my brush completely saturated with the paint, and then I would lose a lot of paint because I'd have to clean it off. Okay, so I'm going to kind of clean this off, and I'm going to move everything back again. Okay, so here's my paper. I'll bring this back over. Now what I'm going to do is test this out, and I want to see really how thick this feels at this point. I put in 3 drops, right? It's made the paint a little more liquid. But what I'm going to do is go into my water and get some water on my brush, so the brush is damp. But I'm also going to shake this off by a couple strikes against the edge of the water here to get some of that water off. Okay, but if there's water in the brush now. Now I'm going to go into the paint here like this, just directly in, and I'm going to come over here and just paint a swatch here. Okay? Okay, so that's pretty dark, but it's also transparent. So what that tells you is if you put your paint in like that, you add a couple drops, you get water on your brush, and bring it over, you're going to paint a very dark value. Now, let's do the next step, which is to take this paint, okay, and I've already have, the water on my brush and the paint on the brush, so I don't need to go in the water again. And I'll put some on my palette. Now when I put on my palette, it is moving around. You can see it's transparent, but it's also a little bit drags. You can feel it drags a little bit when you move it across. And what I want to do is put a little bit of water in this. So I'm going to take my brush and kind of load the brush with some water and bring it into here. Okay. Now when you move it around, you can feel it doesn't drag as much. Okay, so I took one brush, put it into here, and I'll see what that does. Okay, so it's a little bit lighter, right? Okay, so it's a little bit lighter than this, but all I did was just put one brush load in there. Okay, now I'm going to go back, get some more paint, put it in here. So now it's going to be darker again. I can feel it drags a little bit again. And then what I'm going to do is add some water. Okay, but I'm going to add another brush full. Okay, so now it feels more liquid. So it's about the same, so I'm going to add another. Okay, now at this point what starts to happen is the water wants to run down to the bottom. It did in these two, but here it really runs down, which means you're going to come up with a lighter wash. When you paint it, it's going to end up being lighter. Okay, so we really went from this dark to here's a little less dark. Then we came to this one here is kind of a medium value. Okay, so I'm going to try another one here. A medium value wash. Let's say I really want to get to a much lighter wash over here. So I'll add a couple more. A brush full of water. Bring it down. Okay, now we're getting lighter. So I added another two, and you see what happens is it starts to get even lighter. Now let's say I wanted a very light version. Well, what I could actually do is come over here, okay, and my brush already has paint in it. I could just bring water over here, and now I get a very light value. Okay, so now we have a range from dark to mid-range dark to light value. So this process, and we'll talk about this further, is how to get a little system down to be able to control the darks and lights in your paintings, because most of the painting, more or less, or the area that you're going to define your objects and the different shapes are within this middle range. The light areas is for the light when the light falls on an object or a scene. You're going to have some really light areas. That's what you do here. And then you have in your shadows, you have some very dark areas in the shadows. But most of the in-between falls in this area here. So this will become very important in the future to be able to control the lights and darks in your paintings. Our next step is to learn how to use the round brush to create strokes from thin to thick, so you can control those strokes when you're painting.